My name is Renee. I was 35 years old when I watched my best friend of 12 years slide her hand around my fiancé's wrist. At the engagement party I had spent 3 days building with my own hands, and pull him down a corridor like she'd done it 100 times before. Because she had. I followed them. I opened the door, and what I saw on the other side told me everything I needed to know, not just about that night, but about the 14 months before it. The apartment he was paying for across town, the beneficiary forms with her name where mine used to be, the proposal he made to me 1 month after he signed her lease. He thought I was the woman who would cry and fall apart. He had no idea what I'd already found. What happened next would cost them both everything they thought they were walking into. But in that moment, standing in that corridor with 60 people 20 feet away celebrating a future that didn't exist, I closed the door quietly, walked back to my own party, and smiled at every single person in that room. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The bathroom mirror at the Magnolia Ballroom doesn't lie. I stood there in white and gold, the same colors I'd hot glued onto 60 centerpieces the night before, and I looked at myself the way I look at a finished event, checking for the thing that's slightly off. Nothing was off. That was the thing. My dress was right. My locks were pinned exactly where I wanted them. My lipstick was the color I'd spent 3 Saturdays finding. I looked like a woman who had built something beautiful and was finally standing inside it. I almost believed that. I want to be honest about the almost. I'd been engaged 6 weeks. Damon had proposed on a Tuesday, not a special Tuesday, just one where the light was coming through the kitchen window, and he was standing there holding 2 cups of coffee, and he said, "I want to do this right. Will you let me?" I'd said yes before I even processed the ring. That's how you know it's real, I think, when the answer is faster than your brain. I gave myself 1 more second in that mirror, then I walked back out to my own engagement party, because nobody else was going to run it. That's what I do. I run things. I'd built Caldwell events from a folding table pushed against the wall of my apartment, back when the business was just me and a printer and a box of business cards I designed myself at midnight. I'd been divorced at 29, and the one useful thing that marriage left me was the knowledge that I could not afford to depend on someone else's momentum. So I built my own. By 32, I had a real client list. By 34, I had a reputation. By 35, tonight, I had a room full of people I'd personally invited, standing under lights I'd sourced and strung myself. The catering timeline was running 4 minutes ahead of schedule. I noticed that the way I notice everything, quietly, without breaking my smile. I worked the room. I hugged Damon's college friend, whose name I always blanked on, and covered it with warmth. I redirected the bartender when he ran low on the Prosecco. I laughed at the right moments, squeezed hands, accepted congratulations with both of mine wrapped around whoever was offering them. I was very good at this. What I was less good at, what I was actively managing, were the 2 things I kept filing to the back of my mind every time they crept forward. The first one, I had asked Damon on Wednesday to introduce me to the 4 colleagues he'd mentioned were coming, by name, so I wouldn't have to guess. He'd said, "Of course, babe," the way he said most things I asked, easy, agreeable, with no follow-through I could count on. I'd spotted those colleagues 40 minutes ago near the bar, laughing at something together. Damon had not brought them to me. He had not brought me to them. I was the woman of the hour in a room I had designed, and his co-workers didn't know my name. I filed it, kept moving. The second thing was Tanya. My best friend, Tanya Briggs, had walked in 45 minutes late. Not unusual for her. Tanya had never been early to anything in 12 years. But instead of finding me first, she drifted immediately to a cluster near the back of the room. Damon's people. A group I knew loosely, people from his gym and his neighborhood before we moved in together, the kind of easy, sociable crowd that forms around a man like him. She'd slid into that circle like she already had a place there. I watched her laugh at something one of them said, her hand on someone's arm. Easy, practiced. I filed that, too. Here's the thing about being a woman who runs events for a living. You learn to hold the whole room in your peripheral vision while still looking like you're fully present in every individual conversation. It's not instinct, it's a skill. And standing there accepting a hug from Damon's old roommate, I was very aware of where Tanya was, and the fact that she had not once, in 45 minutes, come to find me. I thought about the night I stayed up until 3 a.m. with her at my kitchen table, the two of us leaning over index cards I'd typed for her while she quizzed herself on real estate contract law. Bad coffee that had gone cold twice, her voice getting slower as the hours went. Me telling her she knew it, she had it. She just needed to sleep and trust the work. She passed that exam on her first try. That was who we were to each other. That was real. I still believed it was real. I excused myself from a conversation, smiled my way across the room, and looked around for Damon to take a photo together. One photo. That was all I wanted. One image of the two of us at the party I had made for us. I did a full, slow sweep of the room. He wasn't there, and neither was Tanya. I set my glass on the nearest table and started moving. Not fast, not urgent. I smiled at a cousin of Damon's as I passed her and touched her elbow the way you do when you're too busy to stop. I kept my eyes loose and my face easy. Anyone watching would have seen a woman looking for the bathroom or the caterer or her next conversation. I saw them before they made the corridor. It was the hand that caught me first, Tanya's hand, curling around Damon's wrist from behind. Not a grab, not a pull. It was the kind of touch that already knows it's welcome, fingers settling in like they've found their place before. Familiar in a way that had nothing to do with friendship. She leaned up toward his ear, said something low. Whatever it was, it fit in the space of 4 seconds. Damon's eyes moved once across the room, a fast scan, left to right, practiced, efficient. The scan of a man checking the exits. He didn't look for me specifically. He just looked to see if anyone was looking. Then he followed her down the catering corridor without a word to anyone. I stood still for one breath. Just one. Then I set down the glass I didn't remember picking back up, and I followed them. Quietly, with my face composed and my mind already doing the thing it does at every event I've ever run. Sequencing. What I know. What I need to know. What comes next. The corridor was narrow and lit with those flat overhead fluorescents that make everything look slightly clinical. I passed the coat room. I passed a rolling cart of empty trays. I stopped outside the door at the end of the hall, the one marked private in black adhesive letters, slightly crooked on the right side. I opened it. It was a small room. A manager's office, maybe, or a storage space converted into one. A desk shoved against the wall, a metal folding chair, one fixture overhead throwing yellow light across everything. Damon had his hand on Tanya's jaw. Not her shoulder, not her waist, her jaw, with intention. The way you hold someone's face when you want them to know you mean it. They were kissing. Not tentatively, not the way two people stumble into something by accident and then pull apart horrified. They were kissing the way people kiss when they have kissed before and intend to again. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't stop. I watched for 3 seconds. I counted them. I memorized what I was looking at. The angle of his hand, the way her fingers were pressed flat against his chest, the particular unhurried quality of the whole thing. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a couple in a stolen room. Then I pulled the door closed, softly, and walked back to my party. My hands went still at my sides. That was the only thing that moved differently. Everything else, my pace, my posture, the expression on my face, was exactly what it had been before. I went to the bathroom, the same one where I'd checked my reflection an hour ago. I turned the lock. I opened my phone, switched to camera, and recorded 90 seconds looking directly into the lens. I said the date. I said the venue. I said the room number on the door and described what I had seen and for how long. I said both their names. My voice was level the whole way through. I stopped the recording. I airdropped it to myself twice, 2 different backups. Then I fixed my lipstick and walked back out. For the next 2 hours, I was the most charming woman in that room. I laughed. I danced once with Damon's uncle, who was 82 and absolutely delightful. I gave a small, warm, unrehearsed toast that made 3 people cry. I refilled glasses and remembered names and told the story of how Damon proposed with enough tenderness to make it feel like a love story. Because I knew how to perform, and I had something to perform for. I clocked Tanya when she came back. Then Damon, 3 minutes later, straightening his jacket. 3 minutes is not a coincidence. 3 minutes is a plan. My mother's voice came to me then, the same way it always does when I'm standing somewhere I'd rather not be. Baby, a woman who cries in public gives away all her leverage. She said that to me the day I buried my father, and I've carried it like a compass ever since. I didn't cry. You know what's funny? The hardest thing I did that whole night wasn't keeping quiet when I walked back out of that corridor. It wasn't the toast, or the dancing, or performing a love story I was already dismantling in my head. It was smiling at Tanya when she hugged me goodbye at the end of the night, when she pulled back and held both my hands and looked me in the eye and said, "Girl, this was perfect. You deserve all of this." I squeezed her hands. I said, "Thank you for being here." I meant exactly none of it. The drive home, Damon talked. He talked about who came, who said what, how good the food was, how proud he was. I said, and "I know," and watched the streetlights move across the window. When we got home, he was asleep in 20 minutes. I lay beside him in the dark, and I started counting backwards. Every time Tanya had been in this apartment. Every dinner. Every Sunday afternoon she'd stayed for 3 hours while I was in the kitchen and Damon was in the living room, and I thought nothing of it. Every girls' night where she'd asked, casual as breathing, "So, what's Damon got going on this weekend?" I counted 14 of those before I stopped. I was up at 5, not because I couldn't sleep. I didn't try. I lay in the dark until 4:30, then I got up, washed my face, and sat in the chair by the window with my phone and a glass of water, and let myself think without interruption. That's when I do my best work. Always has been. By the time Damon's alarm went off at 7:15, I had already made 3 decisions. I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I wasn't going to say. And I knew that whatever I found, I was going to find it quietly. He came into the kitchen bright-eyed and easy, the way he always is after a good night. He made eggs. He put on music, something low and jazzy, the kind of Sunday morning soundtrack a man plays when he feels clean. He touched my arm when he reached past me for the salt. He asked if I wanted toast. I said yes. He looked good. That's the part that still sits wrong when I think about it. He looked completely fine. Rested. Unbothered. I watched him crack eggs into a bowl and I thought, this man slept. Whatever he did last night, it did not cost him a single hour. When he went to shower, I moved. I knew his email password because 6 months ago he'd asked me to forward a vendor quote while he was in a meeting. He'd leaned over, typed it in, and said, "Just close it when you're done." I had closed it. I had also remembered the password, the way I remember everything that might matter later. It's not something I decided to do. It's just how my mind works. I opened his laptop. I went straight to the search bar and typed one word. Tanya. There were 43 results. I didn't read all of them. I didn't need to. I sorted by date, went back 8 months, and found a thread with no subject line. Just a blank, like neither of them could be bothered with cover. Her message was 11 words. "She's working Saturday. I'll be home by noon." That was it. No greeting, no context, no "hey" or "just so you know." 11 words from a woman who knew exactly who she was and didn't feel the need to explain. I screenshotted it. I closed the app. I put the laptop back exactly where it had been, 2 inches from the corner of the counter, screen at the same angle. Then I started the coffee. I stood at that counter while the machine ran, and I thought about the last 6 months, about all the small things I'd absorbed without naming them. Tanya's at such a good place with herself right now. He said that at dinner one night, unprompted, over pasta. I had nodded and said something like, "She really is." I meant it warmly. I thought he did too. "She's just easy, you know? Not complicated, like you." He said that in the car after a night out where I'd pushed back on something. I don't even remember what. I'd taken it as a compliment. I was a woman with opinions and a full life and standards. Complicated meant substantial. Complicated meant worth the effort. I understand now it was a comparison, and I was losing it. My throat tightened, just once. Then I poured my coffee. 2 other things came back to me standing there, things I'd filed away without knowing why I was filing them. The first, 3 months ago, Damon had mentioned getting his beneficiary forms updated. He said it made more sense to wait until after the wedding before adding me officially. Just cleaner that way. I'd agreed without thinking. Why would I think about it? We were engaged. I trusted him. The second thing, Tanya at the party last night, ordering sparkling water. Not a glass of wine, not even a sip of the champagne we'd opened for the toast. Tanya, who has had a glass of wine in her hand at every single event I've ever seen her attend for the last 12 years. I didn't have proof of anything, not yet, but I knew what those 2 things meant when I put them next to each other. I didn't confront Damon when he came back into the kitchen. I wasn't ready. And I've learned, the hard way, the first marriage way, that confronting someone before you have the full picture just gives them time to build a better story. I needed to know the scope of this before I said a single word. I called my Aunt Vera, my mother's younger sister, while Damon was still in the bathroom. Vera is a retired schoolteacher, 68 years old, married 40 years, and constitutionally unable to tell a comforting lie. She has seen every variety of human foolishness twice over and carries 0 patience for pretending otherwise. I didn't tell her everything. I just said I needed to talk. She said, "Come to dinner Sunday, and don't say a word to nobody until you sit across from me." That was enough. Damon came to the table, still warm from the shower, smelling like the soap I'd bought him, talking about whether we should do a brunch next weekend to thank people for coming last night. He had ideas. He had opinions. He asked for my thoughts. I gave them to him, warmly, specifically. I laughed at the right moments. Then I picked up my phone and opened our shared household calendar, the one we'd set up 8 months ago so we could coordinate schedules. His appointments in blue, mine in green. I typed Tanya's name into the search bar. 14 results came back. 14 entries marked lunch with tea. I scrolled through them slowly. Every single one fell on a day I was booked. A venue walkthrough, a client tasting, a full day setup. Days when he would have known, from this very calendar, exactly where I was and how long I'd be gone. 14 lunches. 14 scheduled absences of mine. Used. I put the phone face down on the table. I picked up my fork. I kept eating. 3 days after the party, I pulled into Vera's driveway just before 6 and sat in the car for a moment with my hands still on the wheel. The sun was going down behind her little brick house, the one she's lived in for 30 years. The one with the wind chimes on the porch and the rose bush that never fully dies no matter the winter. I could smell the collard greens before I even cut the engine. Some smells mean safety. That one always has. She opened the door before I knocked. She took one look at my face and said, "Come sit down." That was all. I sat at her kitchen table, the same table I've sat at since I was 9 years old, and I told her everything. All of it. The wrist, the corridor, the door, and what was behind it. The email with 11 words and no subject line. The the calendar with 14 lunches on 14 days I was somewhere else. I said it out loud for the first time. I cried. Not long, maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. My eyes went hot and my voice broke once, and I let it, because I was at Vera's table, and if there's one place in this world where I'm allowed to come apart briefly, it's here. Then I stopped. I wiped my face. I picked up the glass of sweet tea she'd set in front of me without asking, and I took a long sip. Vera watched me the whole time. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't say, "Baby, I'm so sorry." She let me finish, and then she asked 2 questions. "Is your name on that house?" I shook my head. The house was in Damon's name only. He'd suggested we wait until after the wedding to add me, just cleaner that way, less paperwork to redo. And I had nodded and moved on, because I trusted him, and because I was busy, and because it had seemed like the kind of practical detail that would sort itself out later. It had not sorted itself out. "Do you have your own money?" "Yes," I said. "My savings are separate. I have the business." Vera nodded once, slow and deliberate, the way she used to nod when a student finally worked out a problem she'd been watching them struggle with. "Then the first thing you do," she said, "is call a lawyer. Not a friend, not me. A lawyer." She slid a piece of paper across the table. She'd written a name on it before I arrived. She'd known what I needed before I walked through the door. Patricia Okafor, a family law attorney. Precise, Vera said. Expensive. Worth every dollar. I booked the consultation from Vera's driveway at 7:40 that evening. Coat on, phone to my ear while moths circled the porch light above me. The receptionist was brisk and professional. She gave me a date 4 days out. I confirmed it and stayed in the car a moment after I hung up. Let me tell you something about a woman who's been quiet for too long. She notices everything. Every receipt. Every pause. Every, "I can't make it this weekend." She's been filing it away without knowing why. Until she does. And the moment she does, all those little receipts add up to something she can't unfiled. I picked up my phone again. Out of habit, the way you check something without deciding to. I opened Tanya's social media. Tanya had always kept her location set to public. She thought it was good for her real estate business. Availability, visibility, presence. She told me that once over wine. I scrolled back. 3 months. My thumbs slowing as I moved through check-ins. Coffee shops, open houses, a birthday dinner. Then I found it. A check-in at a women's health clinic, 2 towns over. A Wednesday afternoon, 3 months ago. The same week she'd canceled our Cancun trip. Something came up. "I'm so sorry, I'll make it up to you." The same week she'd switched to sparkling water and hadn't looked back. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't have proof, not the kind you could put on a table. But I knew. The way you know things when you've been paying attention to a person for 12 years, and suddenly every small, strange thing rearranges itself into one clear shape. My chest went tight. Just once. I drove home on the long way, without deciding to. I turned down Marcel Street without thinking, and then I was passing the nail salon, the one with the pale pink awning where Tanya and I went every other month for 10 years straight. 2 hours every visit, minimum. Bad celebrity gossip and good laughter, and the particular ease of being with someone who knew you all the way back. I used to call that girl my sister. I meant it every single time I said it. I pulled into my own driveway at 8:15. My phone buzzed. The attorney's office. A confirmation text with a reminder to bring any financial documents tied to the relationship. I read it twice. Then I sat there. I thought about Damon's filing system, his desk, his closet, the 3 years I had spent in that house with that man. And I realized, sitting in the dark with my phone in my hand, that I did not know where he kept his financial documents. Not his real ones. I had never asked, and he had never offered, and I had never once thought to wonder. I had lived with this man, and I did not know. 2 weeks after the party, I was still making dinner, still asking about his day, still laughing at the right moments, sleeping on my side of the bed, handing him his coffee the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, stirred, not shaken, like he was something worth the ceremony. Every morning, every night. The whole performance, spotless. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, and I have done hard things. But I had learned something in those 2 weeks. Patience looks like weakness until it doesn't. I needed to know the full shape of what I was dealing with before I moved 1 inch. So I watched. I cataloged. I kept my face open and my mouth soft and my eyes on everything. What I learned was this. Damon went to the gym every Saturday morning, 90 minutes, door to door. He left at 8:15. He was back by 9:45, sweaty and cheerful, wanting to talk about his workout. I knew the combination to the fireproof lockbox in the bedroom closet. He'd said it himself, our anniversary date. He told me once, casually, that it held his important papers. I had never asked what that meant. I had never looked. That Saturday, I waited until his car cleared the end of the block. Then I went to the closet. The box opened on the first try. I lifted the lid and stood very still for a moment, just looking. Then I started going through it, slowly, carefully, touching each document at the edges, the way you'd handle something that might still be warm. The first thing I found was a beneficiary update form, dated 14 months ago. My name had been removed from 2 of his financial accounts. The secondary beneficiary listed in my place was Tanya Briggs. My jaw locked. I set it aside. I kept going. The second thing was a lease agreement. A 1-bedroom apartment across town in a building I'd driven past 100 times and never thought about. 12 months, signed in Damon's name 11 months ago, 1 month before he proposed to me. I read that date 3 times. I needed to be sure I was reading it right. I was reading it right. The third thing was a card, small, pink. The handwriting I recognized immediately. I had seen it on birthday cards, on sticky notes left on my refrigerator during late nights of planning and laughter. Unsigned except for a T at the bottom, and the ink pressed a little harder than the rest, like the words cost something. I know it's not the right time, but I can't stop thinking about what we're building. I photographed everything, every page, every line, the card front and back. I replaced each item exactly where I found it. I closed the box. I walked to the kitchen. The dishwasher was right there. I filled the sink with hot water and washed the dishes by hand. He proposed to me while he was paying rent on an apartment for her. I need you to sit with that for a second. Not the cheating, not even Tanya. The proposal. The down on one knee moment I had cried about, called my mother about, believed in. He had already signed a lease. He had already moved another woman into his future. And then he came home and slid a ring on my finger and let me plan a party. I stood at that sink until the water went cold. Monday morning, 4 days later, Patricia Okafor's office was clean and quiet and smelled like good wood and paper. She was exactly what my Aunt Vera had promised, precise, unhurried, no warmth wasted on things warmth couldn't fix. She took my phone, scrolled through the photographs without a single change in her expression, and set it back on the desk between us. Then she said 3 things. Document everything. Maintain normal behavior. Call her when I was ready. That was the whole meeting, 12 minutes. I wrote her a check in the parking lot and felt steadier than I had in 2 weeks. I was almost to my car when my phone rang. Tanya. I stopped walking. I looked at her name on the screen. I answered on the 3rd ring. She was warm, easy, full of bright energy. She missed me, she said. She felt like we hadn't had real girl time since the engagement. All this wedding planning had me so busy, she said, and she just wanted to sit across from her best friend and catch up. I'd love that, I said. How's Saturday? She said Saturday was perfect. That same weekend, Damon sat across from me at dinner and told me I should think about closing my business. Just temporarily, he said, just until we were settled into married life. He made enough. I could always do events part-time later, once things calmed down. I thought about the year I worked 3 jobs to keep that business alive, decorating other women's weddings at midnight, hands full of ribbon and floral wire, driving Instacart on weekends with an empty stomach and a full to-do list. Damon hadn't been there for any of it. Not one late night, not one hard morning. I built it alone, on my own time, out of nothing. Nobody was taking it. I smiled at him across the table. "I'll think about it," I said. Saturday was coming, and I already knew exactly what I was going to ask Tanya Briggs. Saturday morning, 16 days after the party. I got there first. I always do. That's not a personality quirk, it's a professional habit. You arrive early, you read the room, you know every exit before the guests walk in. I'd applied that same logic to a lot of things lately. The restaurant had big windows facing the street, and the Saturday light came through them clean and gold. A place Tanya and I had been coming to for years. Bottomless mimosas, eggs Benedict, the kind of easy Saturday that used to feel like a reward. I ordered coffee. I put my phone face down on the table. I watched the door. She walked in at 11:03, 3 minutes late, which was early for Tanya. She looked good. That was the first thing I registered, and I registered it the way you register weather, neutrally, as information. Her coat was camel-colored, her locks freshly retwisted, her smile already wide when she spotted me across the room. She moved through the space like she belonged in every room she entered, always had. She hugged me. I hugged her back. We sat down. For the first 20 minutes, she was flawless. I'll give her that. She asked about the venue search, about the dress, about whether I'd picked a color palette yet. She leaned forward when I talked, nodded in the right places, laughed at the right moments. She was warm and present and completely full of something that wasn't love. I gave her nothing to read. My voice stayed light, my hands stayed still on the table. I told her about a venue I was considering, one I had no actual interest in, and watched her take that fiction and work with it like it was real. The server came. I ordered a mimosa. Tanya ordered sparkling water. I noted it. I said nothing. Not yet. We talked about her listings, a difficult client she was managing, a neighborhood she thought was about to turn. She was relaxed. Whatever Damon had told her, or hadn't, she didn't think I knew a thing. After a while, I tilted my head and said, easy as breathing, "You've been looking a little tired lately. You and I both know you never turn down a mimosa." She laughed, bright, untroubled, practiced. "Girl, I'm doing a cleanse. No alcohol for 60 days. You know how I do." I smiled. "Good for you." I let it sit for a moment. Then I pivoted. "How's your apartment? Still loving the location?" Tanya had lived in Midtown for 6 years. Same building, 3rd floor. I'd helped her pick out curtains. Something moved across her face. Fast, a half second, and then it was gone. "It's fine," she said. "Might be looking at something new soon." I heard what she didn't say. Somewhere she didn't pay for herself. "That's exciting," I said, and I refilled my mimosa. You know what a calculated woman sounds like when she's covering her tracks? She sounds like she loves you. She sounds like she's worried. She leans across the table and takes your hand with both of hers, and she looks you right in the eye. That's exactly what Tanya did before we left. "Can I be honest with you?" she said. Her voice was soft, careful, the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this. "I love you. You know that. But sometimes, and I've been sitting on this for a while because I didn't know how to say it, sometimes I worry that you settled for Damon because you were scared. After the divorce, you were so desperate to not be alone again, and I want you to be with someone who really sees you, who really chooses you." My chest went tight, just once. Then it passed. She held my hand. Her eyes were sincere. She had dressed concern in cashmere and delivered it like a gift. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I covered her hands with mine and squeezed. "You're such a good friend," I said. She smiled like I'd given her something. She had no idea what I'd taken. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine. I called my attorney. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't say much, just what needed saying. "I'm ready," I said. A pause. Then, "I'll have the documents prepared by Wednesday." I hung up and drove home. Damon's car was in the driveway. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the second car behind it. A silver sedan I didn't recognize. Clean, mid-range. The kind of car a certain type of couple drives when they want to look settled without looking like they're trying. I walked inside. Damon was in the living room with two people I had never seen in my life. A couple, mid-40s, well put together. The woman had pearl earrings and a firm handshake. The man stood when I entered, which was either good manners or a performance.
Damon said, "Babe, these are old friends of mine. Just stopped by on their way through town." The woman smiled and said, "Renee, it's so nice to finally meet you. We've heard so much. Damon says you do events. That must be so rewarding." I hadn't told her my name. Damon hadn't said it. I shook her hand. I went to the kitchen and brought back 2 glasses of water. I sat down. I smiled, and I started listening to every single word they said. 2 days after brunch, Tuesday evening. I cooked salmon, roasted asparagus, lemon butter, the good rice. A meal that said nothing was wrong. A meal I had made a dozen times in that kitchen without thinking twice. I'd spent the last 2 days in Patricia Okafor's office, going line by line through every document until I understood each one completely. My attorney didn't rush me. She explained what each piece meant, what it could do, and what it couldn't. I signed what needed signing. I made copies. I put the originals in my bag. Aunt Vera knew the plan. I'd called her that morning. She said, "I'll keep the light on." That was enough. Dinner was quiet in the way dinner had been quiet for weeks, comfortable on the surface, hollow underneath. Damon ate well. He refilled his own glass twice, talked about a client meeting that had gone long, mentioned a podcast he wanted me to listen to. He was relaxed, easy, a man with no reason to be anything else. I cleared the plates. I made no sudden moves. He settled on the couch around 8 o'clock, shoes off, one arm stretched across the back cushions, the television on low. I watched him from the doorway for exactly 1 second. Then I went to the bedroom. The photographs were in a manila folder inside my bag, which I had kept close for 2 days, printed clean, dated, time-stamped. The beneficiary form, the lease, the card. I carried them to the living room and set them on the coffee table in front of him. I didn't say a word. I sat down in the chair across from the couch, and I folded my hands in my lap, and I waited. He looked at them the way people look at something they're hoping will rearrange itself into something else. His eyes went to the lease first, then the beneficiary form, then the card, and his jaw shifted. Just barely, but I caught it. He looked up at me. Then he started talking. "You want to know what a man sounds like when he's been caught and knows it? He sounds thorough. He sounds like he's building something while he speaks, laying out each plank, hoping the floor will hold. It wasn't what she thinks. Tanya meant nothing. It was physical. It was stupid. It was already over by the time he proposed. The apartment was a moment of weakness, a bad decision. It didn't mean what it looked like. The proposal was real. He loves Renee. He has always loved Renee. She's overreacting. She has a tendency to do that, make things bigger than they actually are, assign meaning where there isn't any. If she would just calm down, just listen, they could work through this. They had too much history to throw it away over something he was willing to fix. She was being too sensitive. She needed to hear him out. He talked for a long time. I let him. When the silence came back, I said, "I'm not here to negotiate." His mouth opened. I reached into the folder. The third document was a demand letter on my attorney's letterhead. I set it on top of the photographs, flat and precise, the way you'd place a card in a game you'd already won.
2 years, I said. 2 years of free professional consulting, venue sourcing, vendor contracts, event logistics, services I provided for your benefit as a licensed event planner, billable at my standard rate. The total is $12,000. You have 72 hours to remove my name from anything you've attached it to without my knowledge or consent. If I don't hear from my attorney that it's done by Friday night, she files Monday morning. He stared at the letter. Something moved behind his eyes, the first real thing I'd seen all night. I stood up. I took the engagement ring off my left hand. I'd thought that moment would feel like something. It didn't. It felt like putting down a bag I'd been carrying too long. I set it on top of the demand letter, right in the center. I'm staying at Vera's, I said. When I come back, I expect you to be gone. I picked up my bag. I walked toward the door. That's when he said it. I heard him shift on the couch behind me. When a man decides to use the last weapon he's got, there's a particular quality to the silence before he speaks. I recognized it. You know, Tanya's always been the woman I actually wanted, he said. You were just easier. My hand was already on the door handle. I stood still for one breath. Then I turned around. I looked at him sitting there on that couch in his socks, in his own mess, holding nothing. Then I did you a favor by leaving. I walked out. The night air hit me when I stepped outside. I put my bag in the passenger seat. I backed out of the driveway. I didn't look at the house. I'd been driving for 40 minutes, the highway quiet and dark around me, when my phone lit up on the seat. Tanya. I was already at Vera's when the call came through. I'd pulled into her driveway 20 minutes earlier, killed the engine, and sat there until the shaking in my chest settled into something flat and manageable. Vera had heard my car. By the time I reached the front door, she had it open, and she didn't say a word, just stepped aside and let me in the way you let someone in from the cold. I was on her couch with my shoes off and a glass of water in my hand when the phone lit up on the cushion beside me. Tanya Briggs. I looked at her name for 2 full seconds. Then I answered. She'd talked to Damon. That was obvious before she finished her first sentence. Gone was the warm voice, the kind face, the hand held across the brunch table. What I heard instead was something stripped, defensive first, then sharper, cycling through itself so fast she could barely keep up. She said I never deserved him, said I was always too wrapped up in my business, always somewhere else, always making work the priority when a man like Damon needed to feel like he came first. Said he was lonely, genuinely lonely, and she was just the one who showed up. Said this wasn't her fault, not really, because you can't blame someone for loving a person who wasn't being loved right. Said I pushed him away, step by step, year by year, without even noticing. Said it just happened. Said neither of them planned it. Said she was sorry it came out this way, but that didn't make it wrong. She said all of it in under 3 minutes. I sat with the phone against my ear, and I watched Vera's television on the other side of the room, the sound off, some cooking show playing out in silence. A woman in a white kitchen was plating something carefully. I waited until Tanya's breathing steadied. Then I said, "How far along were you?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd heard all night. I know about the clinic, Tanya. I know about all of it. You know what a guilty person sounds like when the last wall comes down? They don't yell. They go very quiet. And underneath the quiet, you can hear the exact moment they understand that the story they've been telling themselves is over. Renee. I've already given my attorney a documented timeline, I said. My voice stayed even. I'd practiced this, not the words exactly, but the temperature. It covers the full 14 months, dates, locations, the clinic check-in, your professional references, the ones you've built your real estate license on, the names of the women in our church who've sent clients your way because they trusted my word about your character. I let that land. Those women are going to know exactly who you are, not from gossip, from documentation. Her voice came back small and tight. You wouldn't do that to me. Renee, you know what we are to each other. 12 years. You wouldn't. I already did. I hung up. People think revenge is about anger. It's not. Anger burns fast and leaves a mess. It wants an audience, wants someone to see it, needs to feel itself. What I did was cold and precise. I built it piece by piece, in parking lots and attorneys' offices and quiet Saturday mornings while Damon was at the gym. And when I was done, there was nothing left to say. Nothing dramatic, nothing satisfying in the way people imagine. Just a door closing firmly on something that was already dead. Vera didn't ask what was said. She came out of the kitchen with 2 plates of peach cobbler, left over from Sunday, still good, and set one in front of me without a word. She found the remote and turned the TV volume up just enough. I ate the cobbler. It was sweet and warm and tasted like every Sunday I'd ever spent in that house. I didn't cry. There was nothing left inside me shaped like tears. I thought about the night 12 years ago when Tanya called me from a gas station 2 towns over. Broke, scared, her car broken down on the side of the road at 11:30 at night. I'd gotten up, gotten dressed, driven 40 minutes in the dark to sit with her on the curb until the tow truck came. We'd laughed about it eventually, made it into a story we told at parties. That woman doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. I fell asleep on Vera's couch that night, under the old quilt she keeps folded over the armrest, the one that smells like cedar and fabric softener and has been in that house since before I was born. I didn't dream. I just slept. 3 weeks passed in the quiet. Then my attorney called. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Damon was gone. His clothes, his lockbox, the good cast-iron skillet he always claimed was his, all of it cleared out. He'd taken the throw blanket off the couch, which I thought was petty, and left the vacuum cleaner, which I thought was fitting. The apartment was mine again in every way that mattered. I'd made coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table, going through a vendor invoice for a client event when my attorney called. She doesn't waste words, my attorney. That's what I'd paid for, and that's what I got. She told me that in the process of filing my paperwork, a financial disclosure had surfaced. 1 month after my engagement party, Damon had co-signed a lease on a new condo, in Tanya's name. A 2-bedroom in a building with a gym and a rooftop deck, the kind of place you sign when you're thinking about permanence. He had already moved her in. Before I ended it, before I put those documents on the coffee table, before I said a word, he had already replaced me. My hands went still around the coffee mug. I sat with that for a moment. Just one moment. The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere outside, a car door closed, and someone called out to someone else, and the world kept doing what it does. I took one slow breath. "File everything," I said. What happened next didn't happen all at once. It happened the way I plan events, in sequence, each piece timed, nothing wasted. The financial demand letter was filed first. Per legal notification protocol, Damon's employer was copied. His department head was a man with a reputation for running a tight operation, the kind of manager who treated professional conduct like a personal religion. When the letter landed on his desk, he didn't ignore it. He pulled Damon's scheduling records. What he found was that Damon had used company calendar resources during work hours to schedule personal appointments. That alone might have been a conversation. But 2 of those appointments, logged during business hours on company time, overlapped directly with the dates of Tanya's clinic visits, the dates I had documented, the dates my attorney had included in full. The internal review was initiated within the week. I didn't follow it closely. That wasn't my job anymore. Tanya's situation required something different, something quieter. Her largest real estate client was a church elder I'd known personally for 15 years, a careful, principled man who had sent Tanya a steady stream of referrals because I had once told him, sincerely, that she was trustworthy. That word, trustworthy. I had given her that, and she had built a portion of her professional life on the back of it. I called him and asked to meet in person. We sat across from each other in his church office on a Tuesday afternoon. No drama, no tears, no performance. I placed the documentation on his desk, and I walked him through the timeline. I told him what I knew and how I knew it. I answered his questions plainly. I thanked him for his time, and I left. He terminated the professional relationship within the week. I heard this through my attorney, not through anyone else. I didn't need to hear it more than once. You know what I felt when I found out? Nothing particular. That might sound cold, but I had made a decision early on that this was about accuracy, not punishment. I wasn't trying to burn her life down. I was making sure the people who trusted my word had the same information I did. What they did with it was their business. Damon did not contest the financial demand. Not a word, not a counteroffer. The settlement was signed in 6 weeks. My attorney called to confirm, and I thanked her, and that was the end of that chapter. That same afternoon, I called the venue where I'd held my engagement party. The coordinator recognized my name. I'd worked with them before professionally, and she was warm when she picked up. I told her I wanted to rebook the main hall, same date, next year. She asked what the occasion was. A client's anniversary celebration, I said. 20 years. She pulled up the calendar, confirmed the date, took my deposit information. We talked through the catering minimums and the parking situation, and whether the in-house AV had been updated since last year. We covered everything practical and specific and real. When I hung up, I opened my business calendar and entered the booking. Hargrove Anniversary, Main Hall, full production. I sat back in the chair and looked at it. That date had been carrying something heavy for 3 weeks. Now it had a job to do. Something I built. Something that belonged entirely to me. I got up and made a second cup of coffee. The apartment was quiet. But it wasn't the quiet of something missing anymore. There were no empty spaces waiting to be explained, no performance required, no version of myself I had to maintain for someone else's comfort. It was just mine. That's a different kind of quiet altogether. 8 months later. The lease was 2 pages. I'd read it 3 times already. The night before, that morning, once more in the car before I walked inside. My attorney had reviewed it the week prior. Everything was clean. Everything was mine. I stood at the front window of the space and looked out at the street while the property manager waited behind me with patient, professional quiet. Big windows. That had been the first thing I noticed when I toured it. Natural light from the east in the morning, which meant setup hours would feel like something instead of nothing. 1,200 square feet, room for a reception desk, a workroom in the back, and eventually, when the second quarter looked the way I thought it would, a second desk for an assistant. I turned around. I signed the lease. My hand didn't shake. I just signed it the way I sign everything now, with full knowledge of what I'm committing to and no one else's name anywhere near the page. The gold vinyl letters arrived on a Thursday. My business name, clean and precise, in a font I chose myself. The installation took 11 minutes. I watched the whole thing and then stood on the sidewalk afterward and looked at the door the way you look at something you've been building toward for a long time, without letting yourself believe it was real. I pressed the last corner on myself. The installer had already packed up. I just needed to do that part. Sundays I still go to Vera's. The table is never the same twice. Cousins, a neighbor from down the block, Vera's youngest grandchildren arguing over the good cups. Someone always brings potato salad, and someone always complains about it. I bring sweet potato pie. I have brought sweet potato pie for the last 6 Sundays, and Vera acts surprised every time, which I think she does on purpose, and I think I love her for it. A few weeks back, one of Vera's grandbabies fell asleep in my lap about 40 minutes into the afternoon, just folded over and went completely still, the way babies do. Total trust. Total surrender. I didn't move for an hour. Someone passed me a plate and I ate one-handed, and I was fine. I wasn't performing anything. I wasn't managing how I looked or what it meant. I was just there, at the table, in the noise, holding a sleeping baby who didn't know or care what the last 8 months had cost me. That's what it feels like when you're actually in your life, instead of managing it from the outside. 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready for a client event. Black wrap dress, good heels, my locks pinned up the way I like them for production nights when I need my hands free. I was running through the catering timeline in my head while I finished getting dressed, and I caught myself in the mirror. I stopped. I looked the way I had the night of my engagement party. Same dress, similar heels, the same woman by every external measure. But the night of the party, there had been something behind my eyes I hadn't named until much later. A thin layer of uncertainty I dressed over very carefully. A performance of certainty I didn't entirely feel. It wasn't there anymore. I looked at myself and I didn't have to convince myself of anything. I knew what I was walking into, and I knew what I was capable of. And I liked, genuinely liked, the woman looking back at me. I picked up my event bag and went to work. Word travels the way it always does in a circle of women who pay close attention. Not social media, not a group chat, just Vera, calling on a Wednesday evening the way she does, voice even, no drama attached. Damon and Tanya were together. Had been, officially, for a few months now. There was tension around money, something about the condo, something about split expenses that weren't splitting the way either of them had planned. Tanya's client list had thinned since the church elder ended their arrangement, and new referrals were slower than they used to be. Reputation, once it shifts quietly and permanently. Vera told me and then waited. I said, "Okay." She said, "That's all?" That's all. And it was. I felt nothing particular sitting with that information. No satisfaction I had to hide, no residual ache I had to manage. I had stopped needing their suffering somewhere around the time I signed my own lease. What they had built on top of what they'd done to me was theirs to live in. I didn't need to watch it. I needed to be free. I am free. That's the whole calculation. Tonight the venue is full. 20 years. The Hargroves, a couple who met in their mid-30s, built something real and wanted the room to feel like it. White florals, warm lighting, a band that actually listens to the brief. I designed every detail of this evening. I pulled the timeline together. I confirmed the vendors, walked the floor twice before doors opened, positioned the last centerpiece with my own hands. I'm standing at the edge of the room now, event bag on my shoulder, watching it all run exactly the way I built it to run. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.